Okay, you guys are ready.
All right, thanks. All right, so sort of just briefly introduce yourself and just your name and general upbringing through, you don't have to go into many details, but how you joined the Army and how you became a combat engineer.
Well, you're going to laugh at that. My name's Bill Rostad. I'm an SFC retired. I joined the Army back in March of 1982. I'd always wanted to join the Army, but the recession was the excuse I needed to get my fiancée to let me go. I became a combat engineer because of my recruiter. What happened was I had a lot of experience actually in the heavy junk world, as us soldiers know it. And he'd signed me up, or I thought he'd signed me up for a job working in a quarry. When we got to the MEP station, the guy at the computer told me that job didn't exist anymore, and I had 2 minutes to pick something out. So I looked at the list of the different things that were paying a sign-up bonus, and I'd heard a lot of bad things about infantrymen, which I've come to find out were not true, but at that time I thought they were. Artillery didn't turn me on, and so I ran this thing that said combat engineer. It was kind of intriguing, the title. I asked him, do you have a description of what this job is? And he said, yeah, I got that. And this master sergeant opens the book up, I look at it and it says, uses demolitions to destroy it. That's as far as I got. I said, I get to blow stuff up? He said, that's what they do. I said, sign me up. That's how I became a combat engineer.
Then just generally, your military background.
Military background, after basic, I was actually what they called a drill corporal. I stuck around here at Fort Leonard Wood for the summer and worked as a drill instructor along with the regular drill sergeants. And I guess one of the things that was different about that was the fact that I had some really good drill sergeants who loved to teach. And so while we were, say, on a rifle range where not all the cadre was needed because of the range cadre, these guys would spend their time teaching us. So when we left here, after our time as drill corporals, we'd already acquired the skills of a lot of staff sergeants. We knew a lot more than the average private when we left, which there were 2 of us in the company I was in, the old Alpha 22. And I'd have to say it gave us a pretty good advantage against our peers as we start our careers.
So how did you get the opportunity to become a Sapper Leader Course instructor?
Well, I was stationed at Fort Devens. And at Fort Devens, I went to Germany, to the 9th Engineers. Before I left for the 9th Engineers, I tried to join Special Forces. 10th Group was right across the street, and they were always short engineers, and we got to go play with them once in a while. And I decided I liked them, but I was caught up and had to go do the tour in Germany. So I was told, when you get ready to come back, come see us and we'll get you hooked up. This was back in the days before the assessment course and all those things. And so as my tour was getting done, I actually took personal leave time I was a sergeant promotable at the time. Came back to the States, went to Fort Bragg, got a letter of acceptance, the whole 9 yards. Went up to branch, talked to my branch manager, and went back to Germany to officially turn in my packet. And one of those old drill sergeants who had been an SF guy thought that he was going to help me out a little bit because Special Forces had ruined his marriage, and I was still married to the same woman that I joined the Army with. And so he made some phone calls, and I ended up with a direct assignment to the Sapper Leader Course instead of going to 7th Group. And my wife and I talked about it, and I decided to take the assignment. It was a little different.
Well, I think you claimed at one point in one of our previous conversations that you were the second generation of instructor.
Yeah, I was what you'd call the second generation. I was not a plank holder. When I got there, we were just starting to get new instructors in. I was one of those guys. Some of the old timers left. I served with several of the plank holders for a long time. And I remember one of my best friends back then was a guy by the name of Russ Bossert. He was a staff sergeant. Came out of 2nd Ranger Battalion, and then had become a 12 Echo, the old atomic demolition guys. And when they did away with the Echoes, they snatched him because he was an engineer that was Ranger qualified and a jump master, and stuck's not the right word, brought him to the Sapper course. He ended up spending 8 years here before he moved on, because there were just so few Ranger qualified NCOs in the engineers.
You spent a total of 5.5.
Yep, I spent 5.5 years here. It was a good time. Learned a lot.
Do you have any mentors of yours that you met here at the course that stick out in your mind that were really important to you in your Army career and just in general?
Probably the best mentor I had was Greg Glenn, Command Sergeant Major, retired Glenn, who lives here locally now. Greg was the General Subjects Committee Chief. He'd actually gone through the course with the plank holders. He was in one of the very first courses ever. Had come back here, gone through drill sergeant duty, and then was assigned to the course. He was, because of his rank, he was made the General Subjects Committee Chief, and that's where I was my last 2 years. And Greg actually made it so that we had some time off during the course of that year. We didn't see much of that during most of my time here. We were always short on people and long on mission, but we loved the mission. So it wasn't hard to do.
So talk through some of the challenges that you experienced while you were an instructor.
While I was an instructor, challenges. Well, nobody really knew what we were doing. I mean, unless you came through as a student, people just didn't know. And the course was so young at that time that our leadership had not been through the course. In fact, a lot of the leadership at that point in time was scared, if I can be so blunt. There was a bunch of snake eaters that lived in the woods and did whatever they did and came back with most of the people they left with, was kind of the mentality.
I imagine at some point that changed, the Sapper Leader Course gained traction.
When General Schroeder became the CG, he was an old special ops guy, 82nd Airborne guy. He understood. And things started to get better because he made sure that resources got all the way down to us. He'd come out and visit and actually go walk patrols as the commanding general. And he knew what was going on because he'd been there and done that. And that was very helpful.
You talked about writing the POI during one of your Christmas days.
Yes.
Expand upon that and talk about the progression or the changing of the course over time.
When I first got to the course, there was no written POI. We had subjects, and we had a training schedule, And so the subjects were taught during those training schedules. But to give you an example, an op order was taught by taking the op order checklist out of the Ranger handbook and hitting every single point on the checklist and then describing what was supposed to happen during that point on the checklist. It was all known here by the instructors. And when you first got to the course, until you graduated Ranger School, you lived in patrolling committee so that you learned it to that degree, so that when you went to Ranger School, so that you could be a fully qualified instructor, you had no issues. Then afterwards, you got to go to general subjects if a slot opened up. In fact, probably one of the funniest moments that I had in Ranger School was in mountain phase when one of the instructors, we were in the low mountain part where the camp is, and this instructor said, "Follow me," and just started climbing the rock, and we went across a 3-rope bridge that was over this stream, and I did what he said. I followed him. You know, it was our whole platoon. Got across the rope bridge. He stopped, so I stopped. He turned around and looked. I turned around and looked. We were the only guys there. Everyone else was still trying to get to the rope bridge. And he looked at me and said, "Who are you?" I said, "Sergeant." "What do you mean?" I'm Ranger Rostad." And he said, "No, what do you do when you're not in school?" I said, "Well, I'm a sapper instructor." He said, "Why are you here?" I said, "I'm here to finish my qualifications." "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Well, it's real simple. You guys won't cough up any instructors to come teach at Fort Leonard Wood, so we're making our own." And he almost found that humorous. But I remember we had our own RIP program run by the Sapper course, the guys who were already qualified. And we sent 10 guys. I was one of those 10 guys to jump school, and 4 days later we took our PT test, swim test, and entered Ranger School. And out of the 10 guys, one guy got hurt in jump school. Another guy showed up to take his place. Out of the 10, 8 of us graduated. And anybody who knows anything about graduation rates at Ranger School, that's extremely high. And those 2 guys that didn't graduate, one was for an injury. So that's give you an idea of how well that group of people was. It was an excellent group of guys.
So then you served until, what was it again, 88 through 93?
April of 87 through November of 92.
And then how much more did you serve in your Army after you?
Oh, I still had a long time. I left here and ended up being a squad leader and a platoon sergeant in Vielflicken for the 54th Engineers. We were the AMF company. From there, I went to JRTC and I was an OC, the only other place where there was a Victor slot for an engineer in the Army. Spent 5 years there, learned a lot. The Sapper course taught me how to be a better engineer soldier. JRTC taught me how to the combined arms fight and how to teach even better. They taught us skills that weren't necessary in the Sapper course at that point in time. We had to be politically correct down there. While we were here, it was a little less so. More like Ranger School or the Q course. Then after that, my final tour was actually here at Fort Leonard Wood. I was the person that General Flowers put in charge of figuring out how the engineers particularly, but also MPs and the chem folks were going to work in fighting in cities. That was my mission for 4 years, and culminated with my spending 3 weeks at the World Trade Center. I'd say the skills I learned way back at the Sapper course made it so that I could do those things. We trained over 1,700 people in 3 weeks at the World Trade Center, people who had no military background. It was an interesting final TDY.
Did you have any deployments throughout that time over in Europe?
Oh, we deployed all the time. Nothing that you ever earned a patch for.
Or, to Bosnia?
I love Bosnia. My company actually does business there.
Well, with your experience in Bosnia, I'm sure there's a lot of mobility type missions.
There's still mobility missions in Bosnia.
And so how did your sacrifice help you in those situations?
I didn't go to Bosnia as a soldier. I've only been there as a civilian, but I still work those issues. I don't want to claim something I didn't do. We work with we work with the government over there to help them work through the leftovers of the war, using the very same techniques that we taught back here at the Sapper course.
Any other? Well, when you were at the Sapper Leader Course, what was the command and control of the course? Which battalion did it fall under? Do you remember?
When you look at my 201 file, it says that I PCS'd or battalions and brigades something like 8 or 12 times during that 5.5 years. To be honest, we didn't even keep track. We just made sure that we showed up on time for work in the morning and did whatever our assignment was, because it changed hands a lot. Started out with the 132nd Brigade, and I'm trying to think what the final was. I believe we actually belonged to 3rd Brigade for a short period of time at the end. I remember working for a colonel that wrote my end of tour, or signed off on my end of tour award, and I ended up working for him as an advisor while he was a 3-star when I was in Kuwait working in my life after the Army. And he was an infantryman.
Do you have any big memories that stand out in your time at the course?
Oh,
Something you'll never forget. You know?
there's a lot of them. The few coherent moments we had. You got to understand, back during the first 3 years that I worked there, we worked every day of the year except Exodus. Everybody did. We actually dreamed of being drill sergeants so we could have more time off. And everybody talks about how much drill sergeant works. But my wife had no pity for drill sergeant wives. Anyway, a couple of things that really stood out, though, were our first paid jump. I re-enlisted on that jump. And I'd actually had knee surgery 3 weeks prior. My first knee surgery. And we jumped. And then my gift for re-enlisting was I got to walk patrols all night. It was all right. We did we did the first Sapper MTT at AP Hill. That was a really neat experience. We had a National Guard unit, and some of those guys were not really ready to go through the course physically. But I remember one guy in particular, he was going to die before he failed. Literally. I mean, we were pumping this guy with IVs almost every day. We were taking him and putting him in air-conditioned places and trying to get him to quit because of his health. And he wouldn't do it. And that was inspiring. He was all right. And then
did the MTTs go away? Or was that it never became a lasting part of the course?
I think the part of the reason that MTT happened was that one of the officers in that unit was actually the son of the Secretary of the Army at the time. John O. Marsh was a Secretary of the Army, and his son was a captain in that unit. And it was a good MTT. The students performed. There was no, they earned their right to be called sappers. It went away because it wasn't asked for, I think. You'd have to ask Don Davis, probably, if you can get a hold of him. He was the CO at the time. But they weren't asking, combined with the fact that we had so many units coming through the course. I mean, we were running 2 courses at a time. I mean, there was always someone in general subjects, always someone in patrolling at all times, all year long, except Exodus. We'd graduate guys out of your phase one night and pick them up the next group in the morning. So we weren't really looking for opportunities to take the course other places.
Anything else that you'd like to add? Change your experience?
Some of the questions that were in your questionnaire kind of make you think. I guess one of the best memories is not a particular moment. It's just thinking about that group of people. I don't know that words can justify the thought, but the basic concept is we had a mission, and no matter what happened, we as a group were not going to let the mission fail. We didn't have any money. We didn't have any people. We didn't have any, we drove our own pickup trucks to get to work across the Ruby Doo while it was flooding. The only thing we didn't do was carry ammo and demo in our POVs because that was illegal. We could get truck support for that, but that was about the only thing we got support for. But that group of guys, nobody would quit. The reason I went and had my knee surgery is because our CO looked at myself and Davey McDowell and he said, I think you guys need to go see a doc. And we were like, we're okay, sir. He said, either go see the doc or go find a new job. So we went and we saw the doctors, and the doctors told us we were broke, and so we got fixed and we came back to work. That was my personal experience. Everybody was that way. Everybody was that way. You couldn't let your buddy down. It was the greatest experience of teamwork I've ever known. This is a guy talking to you who spent 3 years as a live fire engineer at JRTC. That is a very tight group of guys, but it had nothing on sapper instructors. I guess if I was going to point out any other one thing, the one question you talked about, if you were talking to somebody about budget constraints and what should you keep and what should you trim, I'd say if you're going to trim courses or if you're going to cut courses, the sapper course is one of the top ones to keep. And the answer as to why is very simple. In that 30 days that a person is here at the sapper course, they don't just get exposed, but they actually literally go through a whole bunch of courses that are 2 to 4 weeks long everywhere else. I'll give you an example. Ranger School's 2 months. Last time I checked anyway, still. Well, that's taught. The whole course, everything's taught. And oh, by the way, taught better here. I know because I've done both. The quality was better here. The demo course, the only place that was ever taught before here was at Fort Bragg. And that is a year-long course. A year versus a month. Is that cost effective? Air Assault School, 2 weeks long. Pathfinder School. Rappel Master School. Mountaineering course. Small boat course. The shortest amount of time any of those is taught is 2 weeks. You add all those up, and you've got 1.5 years to 2 years of a person being in school, and all the costs associated with that happening. And somehow we as engineers do that here at Fort Leonard Wood in 1 month. It is. It's truly amazing. Now, do they get it all the way? No, but they get it so well that they can go execute and learn the finer points as time goes on.
That's excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for sitting down with me today and sharing your story. I think we hit on all the main things.
All right.
Thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. Oh, I better not walk too far.